Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Tuesday, February 17, 2026 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. This is a regular business meeting. And before we get into anything, we will be hearing from our Carrboro Poet Laureate, Dr. Amanda Bennett. Welcome, Dr. Bennett.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be back. This is a poem about ordinary care, the kind that may not make headlines but does make a life. It's called Sweetness Comes Late, Unglamorous. Care, unglamorous. Love, unglamorous. Apologize, unglamorous. Forgive, unglamorous. Show up, unglamorous. Afraid, unglamorous. Will you be with me, unglamorous? Is this real life, unglamorous? Things we'd rather forget, unglamorous. To be whole, unglamorous. To desire, unglamorous. To know you, unglamorous. In the waiting room, unglamorous. Holding your tea, unglamorous. Holding you, unglamorous. What are we doing, unglamorous? Ancestors dream the future, unglamorous. Taste these grits, unglamorous. Put a little more sugar in it, unglamorous.
Very unglamorous.
Sweetness comes late, unglamorous. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bennett. I had to speak up about that grits now, that sugar.
Sugar on grits.
That sugar on grits? No. All right. Yeah, remember that. All right. Thank you so much for that poem this evening and for opening our meeting in always such a meaningful way. And so we appreciate you very much. So I don't have any resolutions or proclamations this evening, but I do have a couple of reminders. Early voting is still going on, I believe, until the 28th of this month. And with primary election day being March 3rd, so get out and cast your vote. Also a reminder about Black History Month events, activities are still ongoing. I was very honored to be at our last speaker series last night, and we heard very powerful presentations by Dr. Ivy Taylor from UNC and Representative Amos Quick III, who represents Guilford County in the North Carolina General Assembly. So I think there are several other events that are going on this month, so just want to encourage folks to get out and try to participate in those. And next up is our town manager's update. Town Manager Tony.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In the same vein of celebrating Black History Month, we would like for you all to join the town of Carrboro with the Chapel Hill Carrboro Chamber of Commerce and Black Business Alliance for Circulating Black History, which is a community spin week, a community-wide effort to celebrate Black History Month through collective economic action. My leadership team this week started the week at Flying Pierogi, which was excellent. We saw Councilmember Palmer there as well. Tomorrow, February 18th, we wanted to patronize Tanya's Cookies. And then on Thursday, we need to patronize Carolina Car Wash right here in Carrboro. So it's free. Please, you can register or just show up to attend these events. And it's a great way to give back to our Black-owned businesses in the community. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Town Manager Tony. So we're going to move right along to public comment period. I do have one person signed up for a comment, Mr. Isaac Woolsey.
Woolsey, yeah, you got it.
Woolsey. So come on up. You have 3 minutes. Please address your comments to the council, and welcome.
Thank you. Is it on?
Yes.
All right. Hello, my name is Isaac Woolsey, disability rights advocate and activist. Right now we're at a problem right now in this Orange County. We are both Chapel Hill, Carrboro, not too much of extent, but there is like one or two that are being built. They're building luxury apartments, which is driving up rent and driving up property. The prices, and only 30% of Orange County actually owns homes. That's like a rough estimate. And yet, so the few people who own homes, they're getting their property values increased, but everyone else who is renting, like me, we're being priced out. I make $1,072 a month in SSDI payments, and whatever odd job I can do on ShiftSmart and make extra money then. But the average rent price is $1,500. Do the math. So and even with, and I pay $750 a month in the cheapest possible apartment, but I have to share it with 3 other men. I want to get my own place for so me and my girlfriend can start a life together, but she's also on SSDI, and we don't want to have to be forced to live in a Casa apartments, because you've heard about Casa. I don't need to go into details, but I think housing. Call me a radical. I think housing should be a human right and not just toys for millionaires. Mostly now Carrboro doesn't do this, but they have been building a luxury apartment next to the Flying Pierogi, and I'm like, I thought that was very inappropriate, like a middle finger to our community. I want you as council to not grant any building permit or land grant to any developer who wants to make unaffordable housing. We need to invest in our community. Most of the homeless people that everyone complains about on Triangle Blog that are frequenting businesses and messing them up, most of them are disabled and mentally ill. So it's a very ableist problem, and that's why I brought this pillow here to show my solidarity with the homeless and the disabled in this community. And I even thought about sleeping on the floor and protest like John Lewis, but I thought that was too far. But thank you. Happy Black History Month.
Thank you so much, Mr. Woolsey. Very good comments, and something we continue to work on here in town, housing, particularly affordable housing. So we appreciate you coming in. Thank you. We are down to our consent agenda, council members. These items, of course, are part of normal town business. I assume that nobody wants to pull either one of these items, and so we will be able to approve the consent agenda in a single motion for these, actually, I'm sorry, 3 items.
I'll move the consent agenda. Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded that we move the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, and all of us are here, 7-0. Town Manager Tony, we're down to the general agenda.
On the general agenda item, the first item is an information-only item. This is to provide an update on the town's recovery efforts following Tropical Storm Chantal and provide an overview of the FEMA public assistance process. Our fire chief and emergency manager, Chief Will Potter, will give this presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to talk about our Tropical Storm Chantal recovery and provide an overview of the FEMA public assistance program. Ultimately tonight, what I would like to do is provide a high-level recovery status update, summarize the FEMA PA projects that we have submitted, and then also discuss our timelines, risks, and next steps for those projects. As we talk tonight, I'm speaking specifically to publicly owned infrastructure, public expenses that cost taxpayers funds. This is not in any way to diminish the losses of our friends and neighbors. We understand that they are still recovering and will be for years in many cases. We spoke with them last night and are hopeful that they will be able to return home soon, but we know that they are still suffering and are still working to get back into their homes. But this specifically is losses to town infrastructure and town expenses. We have spoken about the damage to the public works facility and to the yard. There's also a fence there that was destroyed during Chantal that is also one of our specific impacts. We lost a lot of fleet vehicles when we were talking about fleet vehicles, they're vehicles that can pretty easily be replaced. And we also lost some specialized vehicles. So these are things that have more of a lead time. So maybe that's an upfit, as in a police car or a garbage truck, something like that, that takes a little bit more time, and it takes some upfitting to make it effective. Something else that we have discussed briefly, but not ultimately when it comes to expenses, is the emergency response itself. So there are a lot of personnel hours, a lot of time, a lot of equipment utilized in the immediate aftermath of Chantal, and then also in the debris operations that lasted for weeks and ultimately over a month after the storm. I could say that the best of our records, 84 tons of debris were hauled off following Chantal. So that's almost 170,000 pounds. That is quite an undertaking. Hats off to our public works crews. I see Director Bellinger's in the back. But ultimately, that costs a lot of money. And what that leads us to is FEMA public assistance. And the public assistance program is a cost share program supporting disaster recovery. And cost share sounds scary, but what I will note for this particular disaster is that the cost share is between the federal government and North Carolina Emergency Management. So North Carolina Emergency Management picks up the 25% of the cost share for the disaster recovery. The town share for FEMA public assistance funds is 0%. Now, there will be some shortfalls and things that we will have to use town funds for, and there are town expenses that we have already, town dollars that we have already spent, but that, when it comes to the public assistance funds, we do not have to have a cost share in that. The program is a reimbursement program ultimately. So that is eligible costs are documented and reviewed at multiple levels through town staff and then through FEMA, and then we submit those for reimbursement. There are a few exceptions, but most of it is reimbursement driven. And there are a number of categories of coverage or of eligible expenses, and some of those are debris removal, emergency response or emergency protective measures, damage to facilities such as the damage at Public Works, then contents and equipment that was uninsured or underinsured as well. I don't think I have to say July 6th, 2025 was the day that this all started. I know that date will be etched in our town's mind for the foreseeable future. But from a FEMA perspective, that 6th to the 7th is what we call the incident period. So it's that 24 hours starting the afternoon, and that's important for some of our emergency protective measure expenses, but ultimately that is our incident period. After that July 6th and 7th date, the town, along with other partners in the county, worked diligently to provide preliminary damage assessments for both town facilities and for damage to the community. And that was submitted, and then on August 5th, Governor Stein declared a disaster declaration for the state. Backing up one step, so there was a local state of emergency the night of Chantal on the 6th. That was the county and then the 3 municipalities. After Governor Stein declared a disaster, he then asked the federal government to do the same, and a little over a month later, on September 11th, FEMA major disaster declaration authorizing the public assistance program was issued. That October 11th date is important because then that starts, the September 11th, because that starts a lot of clocks and timelines. The first one is the request for public assistance deadline. So from that date, on that September 11th date, you have 30 days to submit your request for public assistance, which the town did. And that request was accepted. Based on that acceptance, on the 12th, we had a recovery scoping meeting. So that's where I was our first meeting face-to-face with FEMA. We met at the Drakeford, and then we went to Public Works so they could see the facilities and see the damage and start to scope what the total impacts to the community were. After that date, you then have 60 days to submit a damage inventory. The damage inventory is an overview of all of the damages, but all of our damages have to be captured in that damage inventory. And that submission deadline was 60 days after our recovery scoping meeting. So that made January 11th. So all of that, our damage inventory was submitted ahead of the deadline and accepted by FEMA. Beyond that, the next date that is really important is March 11th, 2026. So that is 6 months from the actual FEMA disaster declaration, and that is the emergency work period. So it says there for project categories A and B. The next slide will show exactly what those categories are. But that is the deadline for performing certain emergency protective measures and debris removal. There is a 6-month time extension that can be requested, but our current plans are not to request an extension because all of our documentation is prepared to be submitted by that deadline. The last deadline is March 11th, 2027, so that's 18 months from the initial disaster declaration, and that deadline is for what FEMA calls permanent work categories or permanent work, and that is categories C through G. With that, though, up to a 30-month time extension may be granted. Those are for some of those projects are longer term and may include like relocation, rebuilding, things such as that, and that's why you have that extended time period and then the ability to request an extension. So there are additional categories, but these are the categories of work that Carrboro has active projects in. The emergency work, so that deadline of March 11th. Debris removal is pretty self-explanatory. However, it does include things like force account labor, so personnel hours. It includes equipment utilized during that, which will be helpful to recoup and be reimbursed for some of those expenses. And then also emergency protective measures. Emergency protective measures is fairly broad, and that is many of the activities and expenses that occurred directly and immediately after the storm. Beyond that, we have a number of permanent work projects as well, including water control facilities. So there was damage to a culvert pipe that was repaired by town staff. Buildings, equipment, and vehicles, once again, the town public works facility and vehicles and equipment that were there. Parks and other facilities, while we did not have any parks damage, the fence is captured under the other facilities. So that is separate from the separate from the buildings, but that was captured there. And then category Z is management costs. So those are expenses of town staff time, and then also the consultant's time for helping to prepare and submit projects for our public assistance projects.
I'm sorry, Chief Potter. Am I missing C? Is C?
We do not have, the town does not have any,
What was
these
C?
are only the projects, sorry, I don't have C.
We don't have anything categorized under C.
No, ma'am, we
That's
don't
what
have
it
any
is. So that's why
category
you
C
don't.
expenses. Yes,
So
ma'am,
no
these are
problem.
only these are the categories of work that we have. And then 2 slides will show kind of exactly what those are.
Okay, thank
You
you.
wanna back up one. From a high level, we have multiple projects across those categories that were just referenced previously. Many of those projects are in progress with FEMA review ongoing. And then several projects are awaiting eligibility or insurance documentation and insurance coordination. As of this time, these are the projects that we have. And so there may be some separation between these projects, and that is because some of these are going to be longer-term projects, and some of these, especially if town funds have already been used and they've already been completed, that we would like to expedite those reimbursements. And so sometimes that is why projects are separated out. Debris removal we've already discussed, as well as emergency protective measures. There's another Category B project that is a Freightliner. This is a boom truck that was replaced during or immediately after the storm, and that was actually needed, and that truck that was able to be replaced was used as part of our emergency protective measures and as part of our debris removal following the storm. So that one is very, very close. It is in the CRC. They are basically costing, but that one, hopefully we will have funds flowing in for that one in the very near future.
Chief, so that I understand the order here, if something is in progress, is that before or after pending submission?
The pending submission is like it has already been, we are for the debris removal, we are trying to capture a few extra load tickets, but everything is prepared. In progress is more like the step right before it is pending submission.
Thank you.
And for the emergency protective measures and the debris removal, so the reason that those are pending, they are prepared to be submitted. We're just trying to make sure that we capture all of our eligible costs. So we are kind of pushing that closer to the deadline just to make sure that we don't get any invoices or we don't uncover any costs, because after that March 11th date, we aren't able to submit any additional projects.
Quick question on that, and that was one of the questions that I had noted. I'm seeing that these are all project-based. Once you submit the project, you can't reopen or resend an application should something come in. Say, we submit the debris removal and then something happens and we find out a new invoice or whatever, there's no way of resubmitting that. That's why it has to be sent in one. Okay.
Yes, that is correct. So because it can't be resubmitted, that's why we wait kind of until later on. The finance department, we actually met with them pretty early on the morning of the 7th, and a project code was established to make sure that we were capturing all of our eligible costs. And so I feel comfortable with where we are. It's just making sure and just kind of waiting until that deadline so that we don't miss out on a reimbursement.
No, and I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Stormwater drain was actually supposed to be a culvert pipe, so that one, we are working on finalizing some documentation for that, and also looking into potential for hazard mitigation. There's a project for the garage and building damage that occurred, and some of that is damage to other facilities that are not captured in the actual main Public Works facility. We also have Public Works yard and garage relocation project. Specialized fleet vehicles, so we separated specialized fleet vehicles from regular vehicle damage due to the lead time that is required for some of those vehicles. So because it's reimbursement based, we didn't want to hold up an easier to obtain vehicle or a piece of equipment while we were waiting for those longer projects.
Chief, could you speak briefly to how the building damage and yard garage relocation sort of go together? Is this, I know we have a much longer lead time on that. Is that eventually going to include sort of rebuilding costs, or is it limited just to covering uninsured losses from the original event?
I would say the answer to that is yes and. So yes, it will cover the uninsured losses. That is what it is designed, the program is designed for. However, we are also, because of the critical nature of the facility and the location being partially in the AE flood zone, that we are requesting that be, the relocation be included in that as well. So they're separated as projects, but we are working with town staff and FEMA to further our efforts of relocating that and including that building damage and the uninsured losses at the current site in the rebuild when that site is selected.
Perfect.
We also had contents and equipment. So some of our equipment was either uninsured or underinsured, and some of it is even like losses due to depreciation. So there were, I think there was around 28% roughly of depreciation in some of the contents and equipment, and FEMA will, that depreciation is an eligible expense as well. And then the last project here is the fencing. So I think that's important just because regardless of what we do with the site, it's going to take some time in making sure that everything is secured well while we work on that site. And that one has been, this says pending award now, that has been approved and obligated by FEMA. That goes from FEMA to North Carolina Emergency Management. So we should have, in less than 30 days, we will have that those award funds in hand for the fence replacement.
If you don't mind elaborating just a little bit, so once it's approved at FEMA, what does the flow then look like before the cash actually arrives to the town?
Absolutely. So I will say that, so once it's approved at FEMA, and then they move it to what's called obligated, those funds pass pretty quickly from FEMA to NCEM, and North Carolina Emergency Management is amazing at turning those funds around very quickly. We have a very close relationship with our representative with NCEM, and they understand kind of the pressures that we are under, and so they are working to get those funds. I think they technically say 30 to 45 days, but we're seeing some with North Carolina Emergency Management as fast as 10-day turnarounds.
Oh, wow. Great. That's good.
Any other questions? This is kind of the big slide, so any other questions there? I know it's a lot of projects, and I know it seems like a lot of, it seems like a lot, but I think the biggest part is that we are trying to move these projects as quickly as possible, and we're trying to maximize our reimbursements and maximize how quickly we receive those reimbursements. So so we minimize the impacts to our community.
One final question, Chief. For A and Bs, how confident are you that we will be able to make all these requests in time for the deadline, or will we be seeking an extension for any of these?
I'm very, very confident that we will make the deadline. So everything is all prepared and we are ready to go. We are just
Great.
making sure that we don't receive
Yeah.
an invoice on March 1st and we're like, oh, that should have been under debris removal or emergency protective measures. We haven't really seen a lot. Most of those invoices are already in. We're just trying to be doubly sure. So I'm very confident that we'll make that deadline.
I appreciate that.
And the only deadline that we may request an extension is when we start talking about the relocation realistically. Because I mean, that could
I
be.
imagine that would be the
could
one that requires a little bit more than, what is it, 30 months or something? Or
Absolutely,
18
the 30
months?
month,
Yeah.
the 30-month extension from the 18 months. Yes, sir.
One more question, if I can send you back to that slide.
Yes.
You know, we've heard some updates from the manager around the vehicle damage part, like sorting out what insurance covers and the gap between sort of, for instance, on a fairly old fleet vehicle, that there may be a gap between what the insurance covers, the replacement cost to get parity of equipment, and how much of that FEMA will cover. Are there any details in there you think would be helpful for us in terms of like understanding what impact that has on the timeline or the amount that we may be reimbursed?
I think ultimately it just extends the timeline for the reimbursement. And the reason for that is after we have submitted documentation and we have submitted kind of our reasons for kind of why we need this gap covered. It can be pretty substantial based on the number of vehicles. I think the challenging part is that normally for some of these vehicles, like fleet vehicles, you don't see the number that we saw damaged generally. So it may be a smaller number, so it's easier to kind of maneuver through, or it's easier even sometimes for municipalities or counties to move on and just cover the costs themselves. Because of the number of vehicles, we are pushing very hard to have that gap covered as much as we can. So that will extend the timeline, but it will also help us maximize that reimbursable expense. We haven't gotten a lot of like finality in saying, yes, this is or is not going to be covered and what those dollars look like. But we are working closely with the consultant and with FEMA. Our project manager with FEMA is absolutely amazing, and working through and pushing and fighting for us. Honestly, feels like he's one of us because he's really pushing right there alongside of us to make sure that we. So I don't have a specific answer except that we are working hard to make sure that we maximize those reimbursements because it can be pretty sizable.
Thank you.
Chief, I said last question. I lied to you. I'm sorry. The fees of the consultant that you mentioned, are those covered by FEMA or is that something that is coming out of the town's pocket?
Yes, so that comes back into the management costs or category Z expenses.
Okay.
And so the way that those are calculated is that we are eligible for up to 5% on top of any of the obligated projects. So if so any of those projects that are obligated, we receive the funds over and above that, and that will cover the expenses of the consultant, but that will also cover town staff, town time, so we can cover some of that. So I think seeing Chaz in the back, like finance has been really helpful. I mean, it's just a lot of reports and it's a lot of pulling and looking and preparing everything, making sure everything is audit ready. So there's a lot of town staff time that will be reimbursable under that category, but then the consultant fees as well.
And that's the one that has 18-month deadline as well?
For the management costs?
Yeah.
So the management costs, as soon as the project is obligated, the management costs become available to us, and then we submit the justification and we can draw down those funds pretty quickly from
Okay.
that.
I understand.
So it's 5% over and above. So it's, I think that sometimes it's not that we only get 95% of the project and 5% for the management cost. So it's 5% above.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Great clarification. Thank you.
So factors affecting projects, document completeness. There is as with any kind of program, there are a lot of documentation requirements and some FEMA eligibility interpretations as well. Insurance coordination and coverage determination. So FEMA or public assistance dollars are designed to be the last dollar spent, kind of the dollar of last resort. And so we are working with the League of Municipalities. We've met with them regularly to try to capture all of our what was eligible, what we received insurance proceeds for, and that will be deducted. But we are capturing all of those expenses and submitting those as well. And then asset disposition. So FEMA is very interested in what happens to especially vehicles and equipment after they are disposed of. So they really want to see where they go and that they aren't just taken somewhere and abandoned or buried or something like that. So we are working through those.
Really quick question here, and this might be for Chaz or for the manager. Have we received all of the insurance payouts at this point, or is there any insurance still pending?
I believe we're very close, council member, to receiving 100% cost recovery. There are some, like the Public Works facility, where we wanted a little bit more of insurance proceeds than we received, but yes, we're on track for nearly 100% cost recovery.
So our key challenges, once again, our eligibility determinations are still pending on several projects, and that is really just helping us capture exactly what of those gaps we will be eligible for reimbursement. Insurance documentation is critical. Once again, the league has been terrific, and we've submitted everything, I believe, all of the insurance requirements so far. Some costs may not be fully reimbursable, so this is all based on, there is a program guidebook that really outlines the eligible expenses. There are some, for instance, non-congregate sheltering was not covered for this particular event. That's been kind of a larger conversation, but we are well aware of the expenses that are not going to be reimbursable, and we are capturing everything very closely. And then lastly, some projects will have extended timelines. You could be looking at years for some of them, especially if we talk relocation or rebuilding of the Public Works building. Recovery is progressing and progressing well, but it is dependent on FEMA processes and available staffing within FEMA Consolidated Resource Centers. That's the CRC that I was speaking of earlier. So they perform costing on any of our projects. And so there have been some staffing challenges there as far as numbers and how many projects they are assigned. However, like I said, we have a very excellent relationship with our program manager, and he's been working hard to move projects through quickly. Final reimbursement totals are not yet known, but they are looking through our documentation, and we feel confident with many of our award dollars, and we are very happy with the consultant as well as far as capturing all of our eligible expenses. And then administrative coordination will continue long-term. I think we got like 2 slides left. We're almost there. Next steps are continued coordination with FEMA and our North Carolina emergency management partners, finalize documentation and continue with insurance coordination, and then to advance the Public Works facility relocation and planning. In closing, staff remain focused on recovery, compliance, and fiscal stewardship. Part of that is making sure that we maximize every possible dollar that's reimbursable and bring those funds back to Carrboro to limit the financial strain and the burden and the effects on our community. FEMA public assistance is critical to long-term recovery funding, but the process can be challenging, and so we are dedicated to working through that. And then ultimately, just want to make sure that council is aware of where we are and what's happening, so that when, as decisions are made in the future, that you have all of the facts and are prepared. And now we'll take questions.
Well, you've had a few. Maybe there won't be any more. So great job on the presentation, Chief Potter. Appreciate it so much. And appreciate Town of Carrboro staff and leadership for just being on it in this process, and I guess being as far along as we are. And I don't know, council members, do we have any other questions or comments before Chief Potter takes his seat? Looks like everybody is chilly willy.
Excellent.
Thank you so
for
much.
your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yeah,
You pulled one of mine.
really quickly. And so, when will there be another, kind of check-in for council, or how often would that occur? I know this is a very high-level overview, but I was just wondering how information will flow from this point since you presented this to us.
Absolutely. So I think that what we'll do is anytime that there are updates in progress, like in the overall projects, that I can forward those through the manager's office for sharing via email. And then once we have several of these projects closed out, I can present then and be happy to answer any questions. Sorry, I can't speak. But I'll do everything by email, and then If we get to a kind of a milestone, I will make sure that we meet again and that I can present here in front of you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chief Potter.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Next item, Town Manager Tony.
Second agenda item is for information only as well. This is a presentation about our stormwater enterprise. There will be a part B to the presentation where our GIS administrator will give some information also about surface and pervious surface calculations and additional information about potential tiers. So to start off the presentation, we have Dylan Kirk. He is over our stormwater enterprise.
All right, welcome, Dylan.
Thank you for that introduction, and always a pleasure to be here to discuss a topic that I'm passionate about, stormwater management. I know we've had some struggles over the last year that have highlighted this, and just welcome the opportunity to get a chance to discuss this with you tonight. So you can see we have a pretty full agenda. We're going to work through that in a very conversational tone. We'll start off pretty just covering some general concepts and then move into a more technical discussion. And as the manager said, turning it over to our GIS administrator to come talk about that component of, some of this conversation. So starting off, we're going to talk about two general concepts. And for those listening along online, I know we have varying degrees of expertise and familiarity with these topics. So just want to really set a foundation for everyone listening online and council members that may be less familiar with these issues. So what is stormwater? Basically, whenever there's sort of precipitation that occurs in our municipality that is going to fall on our driveways, rooftops, streets, sidewalks, this water is going to move towards nearby streams. And as it goes along, it's going to pick up all sorts of pollutants. So oils, greases, garbage along in our community, and that's going to get deposited in our waterways. And so I know that can be very concerning if people are unfamiliar with that topic. We are legally permitted to do this. And so we have the federal government works with state government to issue what's called an MS4 permit. And so we as a municipality have that permit, and we have certain program obligations that we need to meet. And that's why we have a stormwater utility, essentially. So the next sort of definition that I'm going to present to you is the term built upon area, meaning impervious surfaces and partially impervious surfaces to the extent that water does not infiltrate into the subsoil. And so I chose to share this definition with y'all, as I understand from my conversations with the manager that this is a factor in our future rate that y'all are interested in exploring. And as you can see there, I have a little fact down there. 1 inch of rainfall on a 1 acre impervious parcel yields about 27,000 gallons of water. So rightfully so, this is what's causing a lot of the destruction that Chief Potter had talked to you about in the kind of rain events that we've experienced here. And so with Tropical Storm Chantel, and Chief would have better facts on this, but we received about 9 to 11 inches of rain from that event. And so you can see, just given this fact that volume of water gets amplified real quick, real fast based on this. So, that was a terrible experience we had here in our community. To kind of put that in perspective, Hurricane Helene out in western North Carolina, those communities experienced about 20 to 30 inches of rain. So there are bigger storms out there, and just kind of put that into perspective for you. I'm sure our sustainability administrator could go into all the facts about our warming environment and why that's bad news for water vapor and the potential that holds. So I'll just go on from there. So again, I'm going to cover just a reminder on fund types and ask you all today, you're going to have to wear kind of 2 caps during this conversation. You're going to need to wear a cap where you're a town council member, and also a smaller cap really in the perspective of managing a utility and managing an enterprise fund. So if y'all can indulge me, try to wear those different caps, realize where your perspective coming from. I'm not saying that we can't work together, but really there is a differentiation there, and you know, a change in perspective that you each individually will have to undertake to understand kind of how the stormwater utility operates. And so just covering some general definitions, you know, the general funds, I think that's, everyone's pretty used to that fund. It's kind of how y'all do business now. The government relies on a mix of taxes and general revenue sources. You direct that money through the general fund to essentially our departments to carry our work. So in 2017, the Board of Aldermen decided to start a stormwater utility and essentially break away stormwater funds from that general fund. And kind of the reason for that is it sort of sets those funds aside to ensure that they're for a specific self-sustaining activity. They really restrict those, so I know we're in budget season, there's all sorts of negotiations and priorities we're working on. Those funds get set aside. And really what allows us to do this is North Carolina General Statute 168.314. I'd encourage you all to look at that specific statute because really a lot of what I'm able to do is statute-based at the state level. And then finally, just covering for tax year 2025, you can see that we brought in about $1.1 million in utility fees. So I just brought up and changed the slide. This is essentially someone's property tax bill that we received. There's different ways to kind of collect these fees. Many municipalities, they operate a sewer or a water utility and they just tack those on to those bills. We don't really have that as an option since we use OWASA for our water and sewer charges. We work through Orange County. And so you can see the taxes that you would collect for that pink general fund bucket. You would essentially take assessed property value, divide it by $100, and then multiply it by your rates. And so you can see the general fund for this particular property is getting about $25,000. And again, so the difference between taxes and fees, taxes escalate with that assessed value. So if you own a nicer house, you pay more in property taxes essentially. Whereas a fee, we charge a standard rate. So if you're hearing from constituents that they're residential constituents, let me clarify there, if they're paying something else besides $0, $100, or $200, they're most likely misreading their bill. And so there are some circumstances, and self-admittedly, we've made rate errors in the past, but if they're coming to you and saying that, please direct them to the utility and we'll try to correct their bill. So I'm going to cover the next two slides pretty quickly. Stormwater revenue sources, I just wanted to cover some of the other funds that we have. Grants and partnerships. Overall, as a general trend, I would say that those are decreasing or moving towards limited back funding situations. As Chief Potter said, I'm just happy that FEMA exists at this point, and I do so annually. They're a great resource, especially when dealing with damage from flood situations. Some of our other state funding we've seen kind of dry up over the last year and a half, and so we have very low levels of control over that. It's at the federal government or the state level. We try to seek out those opportunities, and we are working with our strategic partners to bring those dollars into our community. It's just getting harder. Moving on to service and permit fees, the trend overall is we'd be looking to increase in line with our neighboring communities. And so sometimes the work of development involves the utility, either as we are kind of water quality experts. And so in order to proceed with development in the community, sometimes we're asked to provide services and we charge a fee based for that. And it's basically to cover staff time to go out there and make sure that we're getting infrastructure and assets put in the ground in a way that we need them to be. We have a high level of control over this. If something, if we're using more staff time to do something, we should be charging to recoup those costs. And I think that in the prior presentations that I've heard from council, some members of the public have pointed that out to us. We do use those fees and we do try to recover that effort. And finally, the stormwater utility fee. General trend, I've gotten calls from multiple municipalities asking what we're doing. It's kind of the same, you know, we kind of talk and as a general trend, they're all increasing their fees at this point. And hopefully I can explain that to you in this presentation. And we have a high level of control over this. The general statutes that I pointed out earlier points to our ability to do this. Covering fee history and operations, the residential utility fee history, we initially started the utility in 2017 at a cost of $75 for residential properties. The asterisks denote some significant fee changes, and what I would say is typically those fee changes relate to bringing on an additional staff member. And so overall, the vast majority of properties at this point in Carrboro pay $100 a year, which is fairly reasonable considered, you know, if you compare that to other utilities, your, you know, Awasa or your cable bill, that's overall pretty reasonable. And so I have some concerns over this. And so if you look at inflation just from 2017, if we were initially charging $75, we're basically covering inflation costs at this point. And so as council, that might sound okay to you, but I'd like you to consider all the municipal assets that we've added since 2017. Every development that they've said, we're gonna put a public road in here. Well, there's typically in the developments that we've done over since that time, storm drain in those streets. And so those are town assets that we need to plan for and bring in additional revenue to have programs that involved in the maintenance of those. And so really what I'm proposing in this informational item is, and what I've planned for in my 2026 capital improvements is to conduct a rate study. And what that is basically a comprehensive fiscal analysis of the stormwater utility, our municipal assets, and you know, looks at the rate, looks at the form of the rate that we use and the kind of formula that we're using, and puts that into perspective. It's best practice and industry standard to do that. Most large municipalities do that on a 3 to 5 year cycle. I would say it's not uncommon for smaller ones to do that on a 10-year cycle. And so, you know, when we initially started the utility, we did not conduct one of those. And so really this is a good period to do that. We have good baseline data to do it and can project further into the future. And then it's really to just assess required and evaluate optional services. So if we're gonna add a service, that's gonna relate in costs. And so, you know, just taking that into consideration. So where do our utility fees go? About 50% to capital expenditures, about 25% to personnel, and about 25% to operating expenses. And so those are great words. I'm sure most of the public, you know, has trouble with that. There's some pictures to kind of cover what that means. Starting on the left side of the presentation, so capital expenditures are actual physical stormwater assets that we're putting in the ground. This is our bioretention cell directly in front of the Drakeford Library. It's got some additional overflow capacity. You can't even tell that's there. It's under some benches right now. And so those sort of nifty, very urban stormwater features, they're usually underground, and they usually take money to put in the ground. In the top of the slide, you're gonna have to imagine yourself as a little robot in a stormwater pipe, and what we have here is a root cutting tool that has been expanded inside this pipe because it's so wrapped up in tree roots. And so this is some of the regular maintenance activities that I'm talking about. I think some of the questions from the council members, how does you know, trees and vegetation play into our role? And I'm all supportive of trees, just as long as they're not sending their roots into our stormwater pipes. And so kind of planning where those assets are is really beneficial. Not to say that trees are not great. I love trees, and they do an immense amount of work in reducing stormwater. In the bottom picture on the slide, that's just my staff member at Open Streets last year. We want to have activities where we can pay our personnel to be out there engaging with the public, helping communicate the importance of this work, and the importance of, following our programs or understanding why you shouldn't change your oil over the storm drain or, leave open paint buckets out on the side of the road or, dump your grease out in the street. These are all things that we see as an organization throughout the year. And then finally, over on the right side there, we have municipal operations, we have private operations in town. Sometimes stuff happens and there's no way around that. So we want to be able to address those spills that occur in our community, clean them up, and ensure that if there's any potential contamination, that we want to make sure it's going to an environmentally regulated facility. And that, as Chief Potter put it out, there's proper documentation for that stuff. A lot of my position in my program is all about proper documentation. And so I'm gonna kind of change the conversation. We'll talk a little bit about our fee structure. Currently, we use a tiered model. Residents below 500 square feet don't pay anything annually. Between 500 and 6,000 square feet, folks pay a flat fee of $100 annually, and above 6,000 square feet, they pay $200 annually. The pros of this is it's simple to implement. The cons of it is it's very minimally progressive. I would say in general interpretation of that is 6,000 square feet is a pretty high value for any municipalities that I know about. As a future consideration, this is just an ERU sort of formula that's used. There's about 4 typical stormwater rate kind of methodologies that are used. There's probably as many as 8 or 9 in existence if you look nationally, but there's pretty much 4 that most of the country is using. And so this is an ERU model. It basically takes total built upon area, which I talked about at the start of this presentation, and divides it by what's typically used as a single family home residential unit. And so then you get an ERU value, and then you multiply that with whatever stormwater fee that a rate study would determine. So part of the statute language is I can't just project money out there. I need an actual fact-based determination about what is it going to cost to implement some of these municipal improvements. And so a rate study is extremely helpful in doing that. The pro of this, it's easier to understand. You pave over your lot, you're going to pay for it. The cons of it is requires very up-to-date BU information for actually owned parcels. So that's why municipalities aren't using that. This is a really big lift. And so, I just want to emphasize that point to council that, if we go this direction, it's going to take some major changes, and not just of the utilities consideration with the other departments in our government as well.
I do.
So,
Can
go
Can I
ahead.
ask a quick question?
Yeah,
on that one?
absolutely. I've been rambling up here, so I appreciate the break.
Um,
Do you need to go back?
Well, actually, this is fine. You talk about one of the cons being, it's a very heavy lift. It would require a lot of up-to-date information. Currently, as we stand, if we were to move with this, just for argument's sake, what would be, when you say big lift, talk to me more about what that means.
Yeah. So when I say big lift, and I think Matt's going to get up here and talk to about some of that information, but there's significant legal questions that we would have to work through. There's significant methodological issues that we're going to need to work through. People do it. I would say some municipalities are pushing the scale a little bit. The big ones can do it. You have to think about, our perspectives, our government. I've worked for Mecklenburg before. They have other units inside their government that make this less of a lift for them. They have a tax assessor's office that, they have some of those other departments that that are with the county in our situation. So, or, basically all the big municipalities, they have a earlier lead time for when they started their stormwater programs. They all started around 1995. Most phase 2s started around 2007, and we started in 2017. And there's other people behind us. You know, the EPA pressures the state, bring more people on board, bring more people on board. So eventually, many more municipalities will head in our direction. It's just understanding where you're at in the life of your utility. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Okay. Is everyone good? Anybody else have any other questions?
A number of them, but I'm thinking I'm wanting to hold them until they all
Okay.
go together. But I'll pop in here with one. You pointed out that municipalities that do this often have, if they're large, their own tax assessor's office. Is there any, so it sounds like there's no statutory block to using tax assessment data to do this kind of work.
I think you need to be very careful with how you approach that. So in 160A314, it says I can use impervious surface. How you get there is particularly questionable.
I think I will have some more questions on that when we get to that point.
Everyone else good? Everybody still with me still? Okay, good. So again, just going back, I took the formula from the previous slide and, you know, kind of on our right slide, the formula's there, and it's over there on the left now. So I've just kind of taken that basis. So in this hypothetical situation, let's say a lot has a built-upon area, 4,726 square feet on it. You would divide that by whatever equivalent rate was determined. And then you get the ERU value. And using our current fee structure, you could see that that equals $189. And so currently, you know, this parcel would be paying $100 annually. And if you were going to use some sort of formula like this, they would be raised up to $189 annually. Again, I need to understand where the utility's at from a cost perspective and a financial,
Super quick, hopefully super quick clarifying question, just to confirm, the ERU would be a value that we would get from the rate study to be able to justify what that is. So that in this slide, the hypothetical is 2,500. We would get that through the process of the rate study. We would get the actual value there. Is that
Yes,
correct?
absolutely. And so what they're going to do in the rate study is they typically take a representative sample of all those, you know, many municipalities use single-family residentials. There might be other conversations that we need to have about why we shouldn't be using that, particularly in a very urban environment. But anything between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet is pretty typical, is what I would say. And then again, my notes down there. So yeah, the ERU is based on a representative sample, and then again, the rate is based on documented funding needs. So a couple clarifying assumptions, and there's a number of them, but I wanted to discuss these two. So again, many of the municipalities that implement these systems are making an assumption or a generalization. And it's that runoff is directed via connection to a municipal system. And so if you're in a Raleigh or a Charlotte and they paved over Paradise, that's a pretty reasonable assumption to make. When you get into suburban and more bedroom communities, it's harder to justify that. We have some very nice properties over this direction, large houses on large lots. There's a potential for an overestimation of how much of an impact they're having on our municipal system. And then in actuality, there's many site features that affect stormwater. I will self-admit, you know, this is the more, BUA or impervious surface is the most important one, but it's not the only one. And so things like soil type or slope, those all have impacts on stormwater. You know, if you have a very sandy soil, your rain's gonna probably go right through that. We have very tight soils, very clay-heavy soils, and so there's not a lot of infiltration going on around Carrboro, and I think everybody knows that. And then assumption two, there's many factors as to why someone purchased a large property, family size, interest rates. The actuality is that higher economic status does not necessarily relate to increased BUA and vice versa. You know, some of our, you know, properties where people are not of economic means, they have gravel all over their lots, you know, and so they could potentially get swept up into this, and something that council needs to just acknowledge and understand that that's a possibility. And then finally, implementation costs must be reasonable and necessary and relative to the benefits. So again, I would say, you know, it's a great idea to go into this and do an exploration of our rate structure and, you know, our utility costs. But again, it has to be beneficial. Most of the municipalities in North Carolina do use a flat fee system. They don't want to take on that endeavor, but I appreciate the council's interest in this topic and the opportunity to do so. So a timeline of recommendations, year one, 2026. We've had some internal conversations about potentially offering some bill relief in the fiscal year 2027 budget. And 250 property owners, or $25,000, assuming they're paying $100 right now. That 250 property owners is based on the OWASA report that you guys previously received. And so setting up a similar program than them. I will self-acknowledge, you know, I know there's been previous conversations. That's not going to help everybody that's struggling with bills right now, but at least it's a start. And then update, you know, our budget's due on Monday. I've remembered. So, you know, potentially looking at our stormwater fees and just making sure that we're keeping those staff costs for other things outside of the utility fee. Continue to seek grant funding and with our strategic partners. I'm happy to report we're going to bring about $200,000 into our community in Bowling Creek again, hopefully, if the funds are received from the state shortly. And again, be able to help our residents in that impaired waterway. Year two, fiscal year 2027. I didn't talk about this earlier, but this previous year we were audited by the state. So the folks from NCDQ came and assessed our stormwater program in September. We received word from them in November that we were a compliant program. So essentially we're doing the stuff that we need to be doing. That doesn't mean let off the gas by any means. It means that we're good enough right now. They're going to come back in 4 more years and ask for more, as auditors always do. But it means that, you know, we've done a good job and we're trying to progress as a community for our size. So a new permit will be issued in fiscal year 2027. I don't know what they're going to ask me to do. They might say, Dylan, you need to add another program measure, and we need to do this for whatever reason. And so an extra program, as I talked, is more service, and so more service, more cost. Complete the rate study. So looking at fall of calendar year 2026, next fall, and really a conversation and a presentation here is kind of the last deciding factor on that. I just wanted to hear your questions so I can kind of guide that RFP. Happy to include anything you guys want to explore in it. Revised Chapter 18 of the Town Code, so the stormwater section of our town code that would need to be updated in 2027. Sounds like it's probably going to have to get updated anyways with where we're at with the UDO, and so some significant revisions in that portion. Year 3, 2028. So new fields billed on July 1, 2027, and payment could potentially be as early as January 1st, 2028. And then explore bond solutions for larger community improvements. Councilmember Palmer, I believe you asked about this question. So what I mean by that is bigger projects that a stormwater utility fee is not, we wouldn't want to increase rates so much to cover these types of projects. So this is your stream restorations or your partnerships with, you know, sustainability and parks and recreation, you know, so, you know, bigger multi-million-dollar projects if that's something that the public is interested in pursuing. And I guess with that, just some final conclusive statements. We're at a really good position. I think we can assess what we've done in the past and plan for what we want to head towards in the future. And just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. Happy to answer any questions. I'm going to turn it over to Matt right now, and I promise I'll stick around. So anything you guys want to address, happy to answer. Unless, you know, someone's really burning for a question, happy to answer it right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just on a light simmer, Madam Mayor.
All right. Hello, my name's Matt Simone. I'm a longtime Carrboro resident, been here since 2000, and the new GIS administrator. I'm not going to talk for long. I just want to talk about the data that it takes to calculate our current rate, and what it would take to update that data if we decided to change the rate. So I'm going to talk about the data needs and opportunities, what we currently have, opportunities to improve what we have as it's related to the stormwater rates. Some considerations we need to keep in mind as we do this, and I'll present a couple options on what I would recommend to update this data. So just as a reminder, this is our current structure. As Dylan said, we have essentially 2 tiers for residential households less than 6,000 or above 6,000 square feet. That is a large number. Currently, 95% of residential households are in that bottom tier. So any type of adjustment we do would impact quite a few people. And so if we are going to go to a either finer tier structure or the ERU model that Dylan presented, either way, we need likely better GIS data than we currently have. So what we currently have was last updated townwide in 2003. It's been updated on a case-by-case basis as we get as-built, as seen on the screen. We'll get a site plan for an addition to a house. We scan that in, change the building footprint. We have a new impervious calculation. Remote sensing and modeling has not been used to update this data. And I think that we have an opportunity to integrate some of those methods into our current procedure. We have new staff on board that can handle some of these calculations. We also have the availability of new and free imagery from the state, from the North Carolina 911 board. This is 6-inch imagery that we'll get every 3 years. There's also an opportunity to partner with Orange County, who is considering a contract with an aerial provider who would provide oblique imagery, which is imagery from different multiple sides referenced together, so it's even more accurate. As part of that process, they would also provide us with impervious models. Whether or not that happens is up in the air still, so it's an option. Another option is light detection and ranging from the state, which is free data that we could process and come up with our own model of the built environment. It's also an opportunity to do this as advancements in AI and machine learning are much further than they were 5, even 10 years ago. So some considerations is to keep in mind as we if we take this approach, and we are taking this approach partially currently, is that GIS is not a survey, cannot be certified. It is for planning purposes mainly. The property lines that we get from Orange County, the tax parcel boundaries, and they can be inaccurate. They can be wildly off at times. That's a process that Orange County is undertaking to correct. It's not something we control, though. And any type of modification to the structure could lead to appeals and staff time to investigate and reply. So I see 3 main options for us to update the impervious data that we have. We could do it in-house with modeling and image classification using what we have on hand, the free imagery, and taking advantage of machine learning and artificial intelligence tools within our mapping programs. We'd have to balance that with all the other stuff we're doing. And it's a good option, but there are other options that I think are better. If we wanted updated data now, like this year, we can contract it out. It would cost something like $16,000 based on one estimate that I got. But that would come with certain accuracy guarantees, and it would be obviously a lot less work for us. Third option, probably the best, is to collaborate with Orange County Tax Office. As I said, they are in the middle of, they've requested the proposal to be approved to work with EagleView, an aerial provider. If that's approved, they'll know, I think, next month, and they could provide us with updated imagery and data by March of next year. So wouldn't be useful now, but would be for next year potentially. So my recommendations would be, if we want the latest, greatest, best data now, that's an option. We can contract that out. It would cost something like $16,000. If we would rather wait, which I think if the rate study is going to be happening and we're going to potentially need, get more information from that, and if Orange County works out, then that's, I think, a better option. So collaborating with them, they could provide that information to us and data potentially for free, or a small cost. It's unclear. They wouldn't let me know. They couldn't let me know. Between now and then, I think regardless, we would establish our own procedures for trying to extract this data from using the tools that we have and the data that we have, so that we would have that process in place, regardless of the path we pursue. But by year 3, we certainly would have it in place. So I was super fast because I know we're kind of behind schedule, but any questions about that?
You're right on time.
So thank you, Matt, for the presentation. Council members, are there questions or comments? I guess we would take it from Dylan and Matt at this time. I know Councilmember Frey and, okay, it looks like Palmer so far.
All right.
Take it easy.
Sorry. This is,
I know it.
Mr. Kirk, I wanted to start out by saying thank you for this presentation, because it's clear that you have done this. You're super familiar with what a council is often interested in. You've catered to a lot of different levels of expertise in this and levels of interest in this. It's a stormwater utility is a function of government that doesn't get nearly enough praise in terms of what they do. It's actually one of the divisions that I hear the most praise about from folks in Carrboro, because somebody will say, yeah, there was this really bad storm and I was starting to get worried, and then I realized that the stormwater crew was out there literally pulling blockages out of our culvert in the middle of a storm. Not just, during ordinary storms, during Chantal. The homeowner assistance program is incredibly popular. I know you're doing, the staff is doing an enormous amount of townwide maintenance. It's actually the department that I end up calling the most, because I'll be walking down the street and I'm like, I smell kerosene. Somebody's working on a reno and I think they've just drained that tank onto the sidewalk, and I was able to call up the department and say, hey, this is going on. What advice do you have? And let folks know about it. So just first wanted to start, not to butter you up or anything, but it's an important department, and it's something that that I pay a lot of attention to, and I think a lot of my colleagues also pay a lot of attention to. So we try to punch above our weight for a municipality in terms of how much attention we're paying to this issue.
Could I add word there?
Please.
So in buttering me up, I do need to reflect
buttery.
that both the fire department and our public works staff,
Yes.
I don't have an operational unit. The 3 individuals that work for me more of do assessments, and really our public works crew are, in fact, everybody in the entire town is really all hands on deck for storm operations, but really
Exactly.
public works for fixing things, fixing municipal assets. I said that those funds don't really work together, but in our size of government, they do often.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for that correction. So I'll extend that also to the Public Works team as well. But just to note that we know that this is an important function. We hear a lot about this function from residents, and not in the cut my rate sense, but in the what can we do more sense. So when I first started asking this question about the tiers in 2024, the initial response I got back was, We don't need any more money because there's nothing more we can, we can't really see what we would do to expand our operations. Even if we wanted to, we don't have the GIS data to do it. We can't get more GIS data, and the lift to fix that would not be surmountable.
Yeah.
So I love to see that, like, you have clearly gone through this in great detail and you've thought through all of the options available. When I originally got that response, I sort of, did what will happen if you set a council member loose on a problem and started trying to get clever about it. So feel free to interrupt me at the point where I go off from the statutory options.
Well, self-admittedly, the folks that do the rate studies would be the experts on that. I've gone down the rabbit hole at this point enough to realize where the other municipalities that are doing this have gotten clever as well. So
That's what that's where I'm hoping to get your input, your professional input.
yeah, sometimes as a municipal employee, we're really the only ones with the knowledge of what's the difference. So in taking that charge personally and with great protective status is something I hold dear to my heart.
Okay. So the question I had then was, well, if we don't have good built area estimates, and as you've pointed out statutorily, we need to use impervious surface as the basis for this. When I asked earlier about tax data, I wasn't asking about valuation data. I was asking about the fact that the tax office maintains first floor square footage numbers for every building. They use it as part of their tax calculation, and because it connects directly to the accuracy of tax valuation, residents and property owners tend to correct it when it's wrong. So what I was wondering is, when I dug into that, was, is there any kind of proxy number that we could, appropriately under statute, use that we know would be impervious, that we know would be an underestimate of impervious so that we're not overcharging anyone, that would come from a data source that is free and publicly available without us having to update our GIS information. So that's where I was coming from when I originally sort of started pushing this idea.
Yeah. So using a data sense in which they've confirmed it would, I believe, be okay. You're going to run into situations where people have split level houses or where a second floor is bigger than a first floor. Those exist out there, but in a much reduced, I think I looked at the single story versus two-story houses. And in our community, we have many single-story homes in this area. And so you need to be clear about that. It's not going to be built upon area upon the lot, but it's going to be based on your actual building envelope. And so that information would be valid from the tax office and also within a generalization that is impervious surface as that is defined.
Okay. The reason I went looking for that was because also of the point that you raised as well, a good one, that if you use built upon area and you use GIS data that we don't believe is accurate, then you're setting yourself up to use a lot of staff time dealing with appeals and other things. So an estimate, so a number that we can be very confident is impervious and is an underestimate is really good for that, because yes, you can appeal it and we'll come out and measure your built upon area and it's going to be larger than the first floor.
Yes. People would, that would be.
You would not get a lot of appeals
get
to
a
that
phone.
because you're giving a fair value.
Yes.
It also helps tie a little closer to the fact that while built upon area doesn't really scale economically, house size does a little bit better. It's still not a perfect, but it's a, helpful.
Yes, I'm agreeing at this point, but also I would like to explore that in the rate study and have those
Completely
experts, weigh in on why the pros and cons of that as well. So preserve that.
I really appreciate your presentation. I think you've sort of given us the tiers as is or switch to an ERU-based approach. I would love to understand, are there options that would take that very easy to administer tier structure and use reliable data that we have on hand or can get, whether that is, as Matt was talking about, getting the, sort of existing data sets or working with the county or other options, or using at least temporarily as a proxy the information that the tax office has right now about square footage. What I'm wondering is there something we can do to add more tiers in the shorter term so that we can make that structure more progressive without making it dramatically harder to administer?
Yeah, tough question to answer. The reason that I shared the ERU model is it kind of just does away with the whole confusion around tiers. It's, it's all scalable. And so you don't need to, when you have tiers, people are always concerned. It's the same with taxes. What am I going to do to bounce, to drop down to the next tier? With the ERU system, you're just kind of, scaling. So as far as simplicity and cleanliness, and then the fights, if you have a tier, we're going to get more phone calls because people don't want to be in that tier. They want to be in the lower tier. So with the ERU model and with a solid data source, like you pointed out, there's no argument about it.
Okay,
It
makes
is what
sense.
it
This is one
is.
of the reasons why I'd come back again to the square footage, because you might feel like you're in the wrong tier, but you can't really argue about how big your first floor is.
Yeah, that's an issue that the tax office would have to fix,
Right.
not me.
Okay, so given all of that, like, my goal here is how do we dramatically expand the capacity of the stormwater utility to be able to expand some of these programs that are working so well, like homeowner assistance, to be able to, with the understanding that you would need a bond for any kind of like large project, but to give you some more flexibility on the medium-sized ones, to make it a little bit easier to make the math tie for a bond for a large project. Where I was sitting at, I'll let my colleagues speak for themselves, is we would actually really like to find out what operationally do you think you could do to improve stormwater conditions, including potentially large projects? And then how do we make sure that this process that you've laid out here with the rate study and with other options expands that capacity without burdening the folks who can least afford it and who contribute the least to the problem?
Yeah, so you're going to have to break up that question a little bit more for
Yeah,
me.
so
that's a little bit
can-
much
I
for
think
me.
I can probably try
please.
to jump in a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey,
Yeah.
for those questions. What I would, well, there's several things. I mean, I think the homeowner assistance is something we can do immediately. That will come from the general fund because it can't come from an enterprise fund. So we will separate that out. To your question about tiers, we've thrown out a few internal scenarios about tier, even adding one more tier, because 500 square feet to 6,000, that is huge, right? Even if you break that up into one more category, it still gives you enough margin of error, likely, for people not to be concerned. Now, I will say, Dylan, a core value is not to add more tiers. I think, though, based on what Matt shared, what Dylan shared, we just need some opportunities internally to flush out what's really possible and what's legal. And I do know there are communities that do drones and they just, so there are other, and this is cringing for Dylan. So I do want to acknowledge that. And so we're trying to push the needle a little bit on being creative in reducing the burden on low-income communities. We do have a 0 to 500 that doesn't pay anything, and then maybe where it makes sense to increase the higher end, the 6,000 square foot impervious surface. So I think that we could reasonably measure in, say, even a 4-tier. Now, having a 12-tier would be just not feasible, right? So you have to balance it, and it would need some accuracy in exactly the square foot. But I think adding a tier or 2 could be reasonably feasible. The other thing is that in this current year budget, we've budgeted for the rate study. So it's really just a matter of Dylan just moving forward with a contract. It's due for that anyway. I think we built in some opportunities to look at the various rate structure changes in this study. And if he starts now, in next fiscal year, FY '27, we should have a reasonable study result that we can then start implementing something new. So it really will depend on how eager you all are to do something, but it would take some internal maneuvering to really flush out with legal's input, what can we do immediately if that's the goal. If not, we can just look through to the rate study. Now, will it yield a significant amount of additional funding if we create an additional tier at, say, $200 for the 6,000 square feet and higher impervious surface? It'll give us some revenue for the internal projects, but not the large-scale stormwater projects that are really necessary. So this is why the idea of the bond was brought up, a potential bond referendum in the future, which would probably coincide with Amy's Office for Climate Resiliency in some way, and we would package it that way probably in 2028, FY '28, to the community for those big dollars.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Manager. One quick follow-up question. I was talking about the, not assistance in relief of the stormwater bill, but the,
Residential assistance program.
yes, does that come out of the stormwater utility budget, or is that general fund?
So just to give everyone an update on the residential assistance program, the manager has authorized us to move forward with the program. We have, and Stormwater Advisory Commission has already approved this. They've reviewed the projects. We're moving forward with 4 potential residents and their projects. And those contracts should be signed shortly in the next couple weeks. We kind of had to work through some internal discussions with our legal department and have come to a place where we think we can implement it. The same as the R3 program and the same as Raleigh. So, those are the only 2 programs that would be funding these this way, is what I understand. And for perspective, I think the last time I talked with Raleigh, they're up over $1 million. Now, we don't have their funding sources, but it's good for them to set the path forward and us to work through the logic of how this all works. So hopefully others will follow us.
Manager Tony, could you clarify, is that, so that work, is that general fund, or is that? coming
It
out
is
of
through
storm-
the stormwater
It is-
utility.
Okay, so
Sorry.
that's what I was talking about, expanding, not the general fund project that we were talking about. Okay. Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, Mr. Kirk, you sort of came to us with caution, I think, with sort of prior experience of councils wanting to, not getting it or wanting to reduce the scope of the department. And we're sort of sitting here saying, like, no, this is an incredibly popular department, incredibly popular projects, and we would like, I personally would like to make sure that we can get you the resources you need to do what you think the department is able to do to help address stormwater at scale in Carrboro.
Well, I really appreciate that. I think, I guess it's my sort of philosophy is, and I think you've highlighted this, at some point, these larger municipalities are going to realize that really working with private lands is essential for them to accomplish their goals. We can do projects on town property, and that's what we have available to us. But at some point, you need that other side to help contribute and help reduce those very detrimental impacts from that stormwater volume and the pollutants that they're creating.
We've also seen this come up in our conversations around the UDO, where we talked about having categorizations for something like a regional stormwater utility to provide other incentives for private property owners to build facilities that would benefit others.
Yes, I'm familiar with other places in the country, primarily around the Chicago area, where there are regional utilities, so similar to what Owasso would be working on. I think what you will see in that effort is the Jordan rules rewrite. There are funding implications with that as well. And we should be seeing something from DEQ in 2027 as well.
Thank you very much for the care you've put into this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank council for the position too. You all authorized what was it called? Residential Stormwater Management.
Yeah, just to thank my staff. So the residential assistance coordinator is Cassie Pettit. She's done an amazing job reaching out to our residents, being in person, someone on someone's individual property, accessible, reachable. And I'd like to thank my other two staff members, Debbie Schaffner and Heather Holly. We all pitch in for stormwater, and I really barely get out behind the desk, so they are really the access to the public.
Thank you. So I want to start by echoing my colleague that I really appreciate the presentation and the work that went into it, and I appreciate that stormwater is a discipline where there's even subspecialization within it. People get master's degrees, terminal degrees, and we have an above average percentage of our town that approaches it as an avocation. And so I want to start by recognizing that I am not an expert in this, right? I have done plenty of reading of materials based on the packet, but like my level of understanding is, if you're watching this after the fact on the YouTube, you could pause here and go look at a fellow by the name of Grady Hillhouse has a YouTube series called Practical Engineering, and he's done one recently on stormwater. That's my level of understanding. That's like kid-oriented, right? So starting from that, I know enough to know that I don't know a lot. But I would like to understand, given our pillars, race equity, climate action, how are stormwater projects prioritized broadly?
Yeah, so just as a general sense for capital improvements, so we started the utility in 2017, and so for capital improvements, you kind of have to build up that fund. Most of the successful programs, they actually start their stormwater programs and then don't actually do a bunch for at least a decade. So that's kind of in the space that we're at. We've done some culvert replacements, some storm drain system replacements, and just to point out, I joined the town in July of 2024, so my predecessor has prioritized. The last project that he sort of prioritized was the fire station bioretention cell that we should be starting with shortly. And so really I look at the rate study as an opportunity to prioritize those. Some of the efforts that I sort of put my mindset behind are some of those stormwater control measures when we do have available space. Anything that we can control kind of up above a stream is better. If you're working in a stream, one, that's incredibly costly. And then two, you're already sort of below the problem area. So you need to work above where a stream is already formed. So our municipality is fortunate that someone, council members like yourselves, had the forethought to preserve our ephemeral streams in this community. As I alluded to before, many of the very urban spaces, they never had a shot. They were developed way before this sort of utility existed. And just to kind of speak on this is only a 40-year-old kind of concept. People, we have subdivisions around town. When they designed those, they didn't know what they didn't recognize what stormwater is. And so my hands are kind of tied statutorily to deal with those neighborhoods, but they're the ones that are suffering the most because they don't have these, post-construction stormwater control measures, a pond or a bioretention cell. And really, they need those there, or they need to be put into regional devices, which the town would essentially have to build. There's no space. And space is the issue. So again, I think you're well aware, our right-of-ways are very tight. We look for areas of opportunity, town-owned land. That's half the cost on a lot of these things is, just space. And then always keeping enough money in case there is a problem in our community. A pipe is no longer functional. We need to fix that. That is, we're in a very reactive state right now, and we need to kind of get on board to replacing some of our older dated infrastructure. And that's really, you all asked me if we were funded enough. That's something that everybody struggles with, all the communities, very reactive. And, we don't want to burden our residents, but we also don't want to wait around for these emergencies, because when you have an emergency, it's much more costly to fix that problem. So hopefully that answers
Thank
or
you.
gets to the
Yeah,
heart
no,
of your question.
that was great. And so part of your answer, the regional, I'm going to hook on the regional device. Would that be an example of a thing that we would probably need to be bonded? That's a larger thing?
Not necessarily. It would decide, so when I think about bonding, I think about a municipal asset. And the most common thing would be, if you've ever been to Charlotte, they do stream restorations and they put a greenway trail right next to it. Usually those things kind of go together. But they're at a point where their streams are so wrecked, you're looking up at them when you're inside of those streams. So we would get there. We will get there eventually if we don't deal with the volume control coming off of our community. There are already bad places. In Morgan Creek, for example, that's kind of a bad, the volume of water coming through there is pretty intense, obviously from our facility.
And then I guess my last one that I would toss in here is that you alluded to this, and to back up again, when I sent my email to the staff, I did say, and I will repeat for everyone, I don't think I've smiled as much reading a packet in any of my time on council. This is really great. This really feels like it matches our priorities, our identity. We're going in the right direction. I'm really, really happy about this. But so one of the reasons I was smiling was one of the consent agenda items, which was admittedly, this is a grant application. This is not money in hand, but this is us pursuing a tree inventory and a plan for succession for street trees and tree canopy. And I'm naturally thinking about how these things can intersect, as you mentioned, because trees can act as an important stormwater feature. So you already partially answered this in your presentation, saying that they can grow roots into our systems. Are there, on the positive side, is there anything that we should keep in mind as we approach UDO maybe in terms of how do these things intersect?
So I just pulled back up this slide that, I sort of began with the 27,000 gallons of stormwater generation on an impervious lot. The counter of that is a forested acre, which there's very minimal stormwater generated on that. So I understand as a municipality, we have trade-offs. People want to build stuff around here. That's okay with me. There are repercussions to that development. And so I think y'all as a council are very aware of those repercussions. Some places they don't care about this at all. So good to hear. Good to hear you acknowledge it. I think from a sustainability perspective, there are multiple reasons why to put trees up and why to encourage people to plant trees in their yards. As far as stormwater, the roots are the main issue. So making sure that it's the same with kind of a utility line. You don't want to plant a tree under a power line. It's just going to grow up and cause a problem for the power company. So it's the same. We need offset away from the pipes, but there are specific designs for facilities where it's good to incorporate trees in those facilities, and it would be encouraged. So really, we base that on state guidance from the Stormwater Control Manual. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so it looks like there are no more questions or comments. Dylan, I did have one question. We talk about climate and sustainability and also equity. And so I was kind of wondering why there aren't pocket questions with this particular item. I know that I do use them. I find they have great value. And so this item looks like one that would be a good candidate for pocket questions, but I didn't see any.
Yes. So I guess in my understanding, as an informational item, it doesn't require the pocket questions, and I would have loved to provide them, but I was still working on this presentation to try to wrap it up for council here. So that's
You said because it's an information item.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So there, yep.
I guess that's nobody. Anything else? Thank you, Dylan. And Matt.
If you would like me to make pocket questions for this topic, I'd be happy to do so.
Oh, I mean, that's happens on the staff side. I just noticed that there weren't any there. And, you know, this item is stormwater. It involves climate, sustainability, and equity, and so I was a little surprised not to see them. But however that's worked out on the staff side, it's fine. Thank you. Town Manager Tony, I believe we're at the last item.
Thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you, Dylan.
Last item
And
is
Matt.
board appointments by our town clerk, Lamar Joyner.
All right, thank you, Town Manager.
Good evening, Council and Madam Mayor. We have a few suggested appointments for Housing and Human Services Advisory Commission, as well as the Climate and Environmental Advisory Commission. I think there were, I know there were some emails sent out with information on applications, recommendations, and things of that nature. We do have Amy, if you have any questions about the Climate and Environmental Advisory Commission, if you have additional questions that weren't answered by email. And I think Anne Marie tried to answer some questions about the Housing and Human Services Advisory Commission. If I can assist with any questions, I will gladly do so as well. So I will turn it over to the mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Joyner. So it's my understanding, council members, that both of these advisory commissions would have quorum issues if we did not do the appointments tonight. And so it looks like we have Housing and Human Services Advisory Commission for 2 appointments. And I was wondering if there were names that rose to the top to be recommended in a motion.
And real quickly, if I may, I'm sorry, I forgot to let you know that on your sheet, it has that Imani Williams
Yes.
would be the affordable housing seat, and
So
that
yeah,
was
human
initially sent that would be the case, but I think Anne Marie said it would be more valuable if she was recommended for the human services seat, just the notation there, if it wouldn't be for the affordable housing seat.
And that would be the human services expert? I'm sorry,
Correct.
human services expert?
Correct.
Okay. And not the affordable housing expert. So that seat remains vacant?
Well, I think both seats remain vacant at this time. If y'all were to make the appointment, that would.
No, I'm saying the affordable housing expert seat. So there would not be anybody here to fill that seat. Is that correct?
At this point, both of those seats are empty. If we were to appoint anybody for that seat, Imani Williams would be best suited for the human services seat.
And not the affordable housing
Correct.
expert?
And,
Okay.
and by the way, Anne Marie did just walk through the door, so she is available as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Joyner. I got all my questions answered, I believe, via email. Not sure council members have any more questions. And so I'm going back to my question about a motion on some names, or if we need to have some discussion, council members.
Madam Mayor, whenever appropriate, I would like to move 2 people. All right.
I believe it is appropriate. I don't see any hands.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that we appoint 2 recommended folks, Lori and Imani, to this council.
Okay, so there is a motion for Lori Carter and Imani Williams to be appointed to Housing and Human Services Advisory Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. Any further discussion about 2 names? Okay, so all in favor to appoint Lori Carter and Imani Williams to the Housing and Human Services Advisory Commission, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That is Housing and Human Services. The next one we have is Climate and Environmental Advisory Commission. I think it's the same setup with quorum issues there. And so I would entertain a motion. There are 3 appointments here. So I would entertain a motion on names for the 3 appointments, unless we need to discuss any of the applicants.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we appoint Daryl Carpenter, Lydia Vaughn, and Alyssa Paul, the latter of whom would be the youth seat to the Climate and Environmental Advisory Commission.
All right, thank you so much, Councilmember Now. All right, so it's been moved and properly seconded that we appoint Darrell Carter, Lydia Vaughn, Elisa Paul will go to the youth seat. So if there's no further discussion, council members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And that is our board appointments this evening, and so we're finished with that. And so before I entertain a motion to go into closed session for attorney-client privilege, council members, we do need to give some direction to Town Manager Tony as it relates to the potential pilot for the East Weaver Street closure. It is my understanding, council members, that we would like to put a pause on that for right now, for feedback, other options, engagement, whatever direction that we want to give to the town manager for this matter. I would like for this to happen in a motion, and so that we can vote on that. And certainly if there is more direction or something more that you want added to the motion, please say so now. The core of the motion is, though, to pause the pilot for the East Weaver Street closure.
Madam Mayor, if I may, in light of what we have recently learned about the project and that we need to do some further outreach to a variety of communities, I wanted to just start by thanking the staff for the quality of their work on this, because that execution plan is not going anywhere. We still have that available to us when we feel that we are ready to take this up again.
Correct.
But Madam Mayor, I would like to move that we direct the town manager to pause the implementation of the Weaver Street pilot closure for 1 year, to bring it back to us at that time so that we can decide whether we are ready to proceed then.
And if I may, I would like to amend your motion to also include some specific directives on reaching out and having some more conversations with all of the business owners that will be impacted by this move. Possibly some surveys around the customers that are be coming into this place, if there's some way that we can capture that information, and primarily addressing the issues that have come up, right, around delivery, around parking, around security, safety, all that fun stuff. And in addition, I would also like us to take a look at what is currently happening on East Main Street with delivery trucks already stopping there when it's not supposed to be, and how much of that is a problem, and what we can do in the meantime to address that. As we look at some of the traffic concerns, I am very much on the same line of, if we're going to have to deal with this holistically, let's deal with it holistically, both with the town actions and the current actions that are happening that will cause some traffic issues.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm happy to accept a friendly amendment. Could I ask you to sort of
Bring it in.
bring it in a little bit?
Yes, again, apologies, Councilmember Frey. So I would amend your motion to add directive to the staff to engage with business owners that will be fully impacted on this, specifically on their main concerns around delivery, traffic, and customer safety. I would like some kind of engagement with customers in the area to understand how or if they would utilize the space in some way, shape, or form. And I also would like the staff to take a look of what is currently happening on that stretch of, on the west main side, on the Main Street side, with current delivery trucks not adhering to current rules, that is causing traffic issues. So when we see this in a year from now, we have all of this information to take into consideration.
Can we frame that as direction to the manager rather than to the
Yes.
staff? Okay, so
Yes,
with
to
that
the
tweak,
manager.
I would be happy to accept your friendly amendment.
Thank you. My apologies to the manager. And I will second the motion.
So I want to, before we take the vote, I want to appreciate council members Frey, Posada, Orozco, and the rest of my colleagues, as well as town staff. You know, we've come this far with this idea, and we realize that, we need to do a little bit more work. And so we're just going to take a pause with the pilot and gather information. I am not sure that there are other options that we may want to look at as far as location, which could be something else that I probably would want to add to this motion. So maybe it's not East Weaver Street, that we look at. Maybe looking at other locations in town, and I would like to add that to the direction. Are we capturing? Did we get all of that? It was quite a bit. And council members, are we clear on what we're hearing for? And is there anything else to add? I see a Councilmember Palmer.
Just for the formalities, I will also accept that friendly amendment.
Hi, thank you so much, Councilmember Frey.
I want to make sure, so the work that we have received to date, from my understanding, one of the core things that was going to happen from the last presentation that we saw on this was engineering work to address light timings at a complicated and frustrating intersection that would potentially have addressed some of the valid concerns that we have heard. And so I don't know that I'm altering anything or asking for any sort of amendment to the motion, but I want to make sure that work happens in a timely fashion, that we don't end up losing that because we're punting by a year. Because I think that open streets, for example, is not going away, right? We do intend to honor requests under our current framework where we have street closures, and some of the concerns that we have heard stem from impacts on those days, and we can improve things. We can do that process better as a separate matter from this pilot that was under discussion, and I don't want us to lose out on that potential benefit. And so some of the negative feedback that we've gotten, I think that we can actually build in goodwill by continuing that work. Am I explaining myself well?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Is that part,
I don't think
are you
it is.
accepting that as, you wanting that
I
to be
don't think you're
accepted as?
trying to amend it, but I guess, if I may, Manager Tony, do you have any thoughts to share with us here on, there's a point that this intersection, we're pausing the closure
Right.
for some very specific reasons. That intersection doesn't get better in the meantime.
I want to do some work there.
What direction do you need from us around that?
The engineer services cost, I would definitely have to come back with a budget amendment for that. We would have to see if for our regularly scheduled programming for street closures, 4th of July, open streets, so forth, that an engineer could in fact do a weekend sporadically, right? And so that's what I would just need to confirm, and then we would need to just see what the resources and the cost would be.
Yep. So it's part of information.
Yeah.
Go with the motion.
I think I'm
And
good
all
with
the
that.
amendments.
As collected, yes. Okay, I want to just check, Mayor Pro Tem Posada Orozco, you had seconded, are you still seconding the
will.
amended? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So council members, we do have a motion and a second about the pause for the East Weaver Street closure, and we have a time frame on that as part of the motion for a year, as Councilmember Frey said, along with all of the amendments from myself, Councilmember Posada Orozco, and Councilmember Palmer. So if there is no further discussion, council members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Now we need a motion to go into closed session, attorney-client privilege.
Madam Mayor, I move that we go to closed session.
Question, can we have 5 minutes before we?
Oh, yeah, we'll have that.
Okay.
We'll have that. We won't go directly in, they gotta.
And
You
is
want a
there a
second?
vote or not
You have to
coming out? I second the motion, sorry.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, in closed
Ma-
session.
Mayor, if I may, will you just let the public know and anybody watching if there is a need to come back for any vote after the closed session?
That I don't know.
I don't think we'll need one.
I don't think so. I feel like that's information and no vote.
Okay,
Pretty sure of that.
thank you.
So they can roll on. Yes, it takes 5 minutes or so, guys.
Can I get some water?